It's great to be here. Sean will be piping in a little bit on it, but with the county attorneys I usually have, they always want to speak after me because they usually have to make corrections, and so I think Sean's taking on that role today. And thankfully I don't have any county commissioners here that I need to be nervous about.
But I'll report everything you say back to them.
Yeah. So I put this up. I actually was in California a couple weeks ago and saw this sign, or these two signs, and you know, it's really, you know, how much of it is our leadership or direction that we're given. You know, maybe it's direction that we're giving to our own staff or to our planning commissions. If we are staff working with the planning commission, you know, we need clear direction. I want to, just a little background about me. So for part of growing up, I lived up in Portland, Oregon. And my dad did something really cool that I think really got me to where I am now. Every weekend, he would take us out in a car, and he would drive us to different parts of the town. We'd get out, and just different parts of town, get out, and we'd go walk around for an hour. And he liked asking us questions about what we liked about what we were seeing. We looked at the types of housing that was there, the buildings, the beautiful landscape, and things we liked and didn't like. And, you know, I mean, my dad was an accountant, so I don't know why he was so into design, but, you know, I think I went into planning because I liked architecture, and I liked pretty parks, and, you know, as more and more I got into planning, it really is, I shared it with Alex a little bit, but, you know, I feel like now I'm kind of an underpaid mediator, and as far as punching bags go, maybe I'm a little overpaid, but that's about what my role is right now. We've had some really political hot topics in the county lately, and some of them have to do with conditional uses, complete applications, moratoriums, and legislative bodies, land use bodies. So this has been a very good session, and hopefully it stays that way. What I hope to do is just give some examples of some of the things that we've tried down in Washington County. We feel like, you know, we have 4.5 million people plus coming to our county every year because of Zion National Park. And, you know, it seems it's not just people from out of state, it's also Mormon Miami. So everyone in Utah goes down to St. George to hang out on spring breaks or UEA, and you know, so we have all these people coming here, and we have this real balance of they're all coming here, they're wearing out our roads, they're making our housing more expensive. You know, we have a lot of residents, you know, no more tourism. Why are you still spending money on tourism? One of the things that I really felt, so I've been in Washington County now for about 7 years. When I first got to Washington County, I went in and talked to the county commissioners, and I lived in St. George, I was seeing all the great trails, and I went in and asked them, I'm like, is there any type of master planning, trails committee, anything like that? And the response I got back then, and I'm safe saying it because now they're no longer county commissioners, but the response I got was, the cities are doing all right, let's just let them do that. And so there wasn't this, at that time, from the county government side, there wasn't this real urgency or a feeling like, let's work together with all of our communities, let's just let everyone do what they want to do. And I'm not the reason, but has been a real shift over the last couple of years, and I've seen it at the county level. I think St. George has been trying to be a better neighbor longer than the county has been trying to be a better neighbor and partner. One of the things that I'll touch a little bit just on the trails aspect of it, I want to, you know, we're talking about planning commissions and staff and land use authorities and working with cities, but Washington County, like 75% of it is, or should go the other way, we're only about we're under 20% of our land is private land in Washington County. So it's a lot more than just dealing with cities. We have BLM, Forest Service, national parks, and SITLA. We have a lot of land holders. And so we saw a real need as we're working with these different, it's not just municipalities, it's all these other groups. So how do we all get on the same page and play nice together? How many in here have had an experience, maybe even lately, where you've been involved in some project and then a decision's made at a higher level, or maybe even at a lower level, you think that you're going in a certain direction, but then something changes and you're like, did you not know that we were working on that? Anyone have any experiences they want to share?
Just short-term rental ordinance changes and thinking we're going in a forward direction, and then after full discussion and public input, eventually it completely changed to where it was nothing like what it was originally proposed for, and it was like, wow, maybe we shouldn't have taken a look at that, but we needed to. Ultimately, it just was.
What county are you from?
Kane County.
King County, yeah. I can see where we have probably 2,000 illegal short-term rentals in St. George.
You know, one of the things that, as we're talking about communication, I think within an organization, there's a huge issue. So often I would notice that the county-wide, the mayors would get together for a mayor's luncheon, and the county commission would be involved with that, and there would be different topics talked about there. But then it wouldn't trickle, they may be talking about affordable housing, but then it didn't seem like the planners were being involved in the conversation with it. And so trying to figure out a way so there's more communication within our own organization. Ended up working with tourism and economic development. I worked for the county for 2 years without really knowing the economic development department head. And so we thought, you know what, we really need to be working together and, understanding what the vision is for the county. And, if tourism, an example of it is camping. We have all of these people coming to Washington County, and we get complaints from all the cities along and all the little municipalities in what's called the Zion Canyon Corridor. And that's kind of from the Laverkin, the Maverick and Laverkin, all the way into the national park. We have people camping everywhere. There's concerns about, where's the waste going? They're right along the Virgin River. This isn't a good thing. But the only jurisdiction that allowed camping is Washington County and the BLM. None of the cities allowed it. So they were always complaining about what the issue was, but they themselves weren't looking at how can we be a part of the overall solution. Anyway, so I ended up meeting with tourism director and economic development, and we just kind of talked about obviously we have to get the county commission involved in it, but just making sure that we're working together and for what this overall plan is for Washington County. I think one reason why the city and county work well together now is we're kind of isolated, and it just feels like we're just kind of at the bottom of the state, and we're down there, and we all need to be together. I think you may have seen that we just rebranded our tourism. It used to be St. George Area Tourism. There was some heartache with some of the other jurisdictions saying, why is it St. George Area Tourism? Why isn't it Washington County? But there's like 35 other Washington counties in the country. So people know where St. George is, people know where Zion is. Washington County's kind of white noise. And so it was trying to coordinate, come up with a way and a vision to market and sell our community. You can jump in any time, but one of the things that I'm going to go back to trails for a little bit and just the overall committee that we tried to create. Now we have cities that are heavily involved. We have cities like St. George and Washington, and Santa Clara and Hurricane. I'm still getting used to calling it Hurricane. I got corrected in a public meeting for not calling it Hurricane. But then we had some smaller players. You know, we have Hilldales and the Apple Valleys. And how do we get all of these people to come in a meeting and the BLM and Forest Service? And meanwhile, we want BLM to be a partner, but there's actually at the higher level, our county commission suing the BLM. So how do we get BLM staff to come in and work with us? And so it was a real challenge. And so what I did is created a trails committee. And we started inviting people to start inviting different groups. And we tried to get user groups involved. We looked at who the different user groups were, got some activists for that, you know, cycling, horseback riding, OHV, and hiking groups, and got them involved, and then we got all these landholders in the room. And our committee kept growing and growing, you know, and I don't want to have meetings just to have meetings. So it's trying to have a productive meeting where we're getting something done and everyone feels like they're valued for being in there, but we have 70 people in a room. There were some real challenges, and I don't know if it's, I feel like it's working all right. What we ended up doing is we ended up breaking the communities or the region into, or the county into smaller regions and saying, okay, look, St. George is in the middle. What are the cities that touch St. George? Let's get representatives that are working on the trails from each of those cities, and hopefully the mayor and some elected officials from the city in a meeting, and let's talk about the outdoor recreation goals and where they want to see trails. And
Can I just say on that front?
yeah.
You know, I've been there 17 years, and this is where I have kind of a different perspective than Scott, because I came from the Wasatch Front. I also worked at UAC, and I always like to say that I was chairman of the Planning Commission in Springville, and along the Wasatch Front, it was the cities hate the county hates the cities, and they both hate the school district. That's what I used to say. You know, I get down to Washington County, and you know, I'm the St. George City Attorney, and they say, hey, we're building a new high school, and they want us to put in the track. I'm like, why would we do that? And that's when I had to sit down with our mayor, our city manager, and with you know, just some of the school district people, but mostly with my mayor and city manager. Said, look, we have the same taxpayers here. The city of St. George, really, we run the dispatch for the whole county. We treat the wastewater. We actually run the wastewater treatment facility. We own the bus system, and we run it ourselves, no UTA. We work together because it's the same taxpayers. So school district agrees that they'll leave that track open in the mornings. They'll open them up at 6 a.m. and won't close them until dark at night, and that our citizens could go out and walk on them, run on them, do whatever they want, unless it's those days when they're being used. It makes sense. We did that for the college on their baseball fields. We've traded lights back and forth. We had one time when we got the state to build a new courthouse down there with looking like, I don't know if you've seen ours, with the old style sandstone look, where the state said, no way will we do this, and no way will we build this for another 10 years. And so we just worked around it. As my good friend Ed Phillips told me one time, a little more colorfully, you're always going to work around butt heads. So that's what you do, work around them. And we got it with DFCM, made some friends there, built a courthouse. But to do that courthouse, we had to work with the school district. We actually had 5 pieces of property that we had gone for maybe 6 years and hadn't transferred the titles completely yet, because we had been they needed property out in the fields where it was growing fast, the school district did. We could have sold it to a developer for a lot of money, but instead we sold it at a pretty low value to the school district because we wanted them to be able to build a school there. The county has helped us with we're partners in the Dixie Center, and that's the way it's always been. So trails, we started the trails in St. George and had 30 miles worth of trails. Rising tide raises all ships. Then the other cities saw that and said, hey, we kind of want that same thing that St. George is doing. So that's when I look at Kane County and say, what Scott's saying, that is, you get with Kanab and you say, what's the vision we want for everyone? Because we can do this together. We built a lot of sports facilities in St. George, and we bear the cost of it. In fact, most of you have been to a budget hearing. We just had ours the other night, where someone from Santa Clara told us how embarrassed she was about going to our pickleball facility and the condition it was in with her friends from Ivans. And we're like, well, go to Ivans and Santa Clara's pickleball facilities. Oh, they don't have any. That's right. But we're taxpayers of St. George, but we don't look at it that way. We said, we got to build all these for everyone. Now we're going to the county and saying, you've got the TRT funds. We've built all the ball diamonds and everything. Now Washington's starting to do the soccer fields and some of the others. Let's get together and use that money and work together to keep that momentum going. And it works. For some reason, that works. I can tell you a few times when there have been some hiccups, and you probably will see these too. We border with Washington City, and we build a new bridge. 70% of that traffic is actually Washington City traffic that's going over the bridge, but the city of St. George put that bridge in because we needed to get across the Virgin River. But that opened that property for development. Now we have its own commercial or office, and it's right next door to homes in Washington. And you know, a lot of times in some jurisdictions, you'll see them say, we don't care, it's a different city. But our mayor and council let those residents speak. When the zone change hearing came up, they let them speak because they wanted to hear what they had to say. Because there's going to be a time when Washington is going to want to approve something next to our citizens that we wouldn't necessarily like, and we want them to listen to what they have to say. Another example is a cell tower in a peninsula. I would say an illegally created peninsula, but after a year it's legal. That was Washington County, unincorporated area, but surrounded by the city. And that is a pretty tall cell tower. Yes, it is. We had no idea. I don't know how this happened. Normally, Washington County, they would pick up the phone and let us know that this is coming. And so they approved it. And then the cell tower company came to us and said, we need power to our cell tower. And I said, no, not unless you annex. And by the way, we wouldn't necessarily recognize that recognition. So we were in a lawsuit. And we were in a lawsuit for over a year on that one. And that's one of those ones where I think, gosh,
It's because I didn't call him.
if you guys had just talked to us, we could have coordinated this better, and we wouldn't have had to be in this lawsuit. Now, one of the ways we resolved the lawsuit, by the way, is we turned that illegally created peninsula into an illegally created island. And they annexed it. But, you know, after a year it's legal. But you know, we probably couldn't have gotten to that resolution if we couldn't sit down with the county and say, okay, we got a problem here, and we're not going to serve extraterritorially any services, because once you start that, then you get someone who says, I want to build a hotel right over the Kanab city line in King County, but I want Kanab to give us the sewer and water. And then you look at that and say, then what's the point of even having the zoning? You know, there's no one here from Grand Zuma, from San Juan. Okay, so you remember the issues of Spanish Valley, you know, right over
the issues, I live it.
There you go. And so, you know, for a long time there was quite a bit of tension there because, you know, Moab City had their ideas of what should go on. You know, Grand County had their ideas, and San Juan County saying, hey, you know, we want the growth here. It'll generate some income for us. And so those things, they can either you can work together to solve them on the zoning issues by sitting down and coordinating your plans, or you could just have a developer come in and start duking it out, and pretty soon you could end up in a lawsuit like we did to try to enforce it. Much better to try to sit down and coordinate those plans. And did someone say earlier that they were actually planning extraterritorially? They were before they annexed property?
There's at least a conversation about that in Heber. How's that?
Yeah. And I just think that is a scary thought, because your one opportunity, if you're a city, to be able to exact anything in an annexation is at an annexation. Right now we're going through one on the west side where we need a roadway. And they're saying, we don't want to give you the roadway. And we're saying, well then annex to the city that's adjacent. Oh, there's not one. So, you know, either we get the roadway now or you stay in the county, you know. But if we had pre-zoned that, for example, 10 years ago and someone just forgets that we did it. And then they come in and they make an application along those the plan that was approved, but everything around is developed differently, which happens quite a bit. I just think that puts you in an awkward position.
So the Heber thing wouldn't be zoning for that, unless they annex, right? But
Right, no, I understand that.
just thinking about the land uses in sort of their area of influence and where Heber or Wasatch Friends, there you are, okay, sorry. Where these developers have been talking to the community.
Oh, okay, so if you're working with someone to bring it in, that's a different story.
Yeah.
If you just went out and affirmatively said, and we did have some property owners that wanted us to do that before they even had developers, because obviously they want to sell for more money, and we said no. We have developments on either side, we're not quite sure how they're going to develop, and we don't want to have your plan kind of like a thumb sticking in the middle of something that doesn't work with it. So when the time comes that you actually are going to annex, we'll sit down and start talking about that and how to bring it in.
We have a development, sorry, I'll tell the story. Oh, go ahead.
An example, one of the counties just called me a couple weeks ago. I don't remember which one, but I wouldn't narc on them anyway. But they were in a situation where their planning commission was told by one of the cities that, hey, we talked about annexing this area 10 years ago. And so because we talked about it, you can't change anything there now. Read the statute. Well, they were reading the statute from 10 years ago and remembering what they were told 10 years ago about the annexation statute. So that kind of stuff is going on out there. And again, it's if you're talking and educating and people know what the current statute says, they can save a lot of headache. But the city was all ready to file their lawsuit against the county for talking about making some changes to their plan in this area that they said that they were annexing. Well, you talked about it 10 years ago, you haven't done a thing since. That's not really...
Yeah, totally agree with that.
We have a situation where people are trying to, there's a subdivision or an area, it's called Sky Ranch. It's near Hurricane, some of it's unincorporated county, some's incorporated. And there was a developer that was mad. They had just annexed into Hurricane City. They didn't like the road cross-section that the city was making them build. And we weren't made aware of the disconnect, but they ended up they got pretty far along in the disconnect or de-annexation process, came back into the county, but it was development without the roads. The city kept the development, but not the roads. But what we had, because of communication in our code, yes, in a lot of the county, we have less of a design standard than the city does, but we have a little caveat in there that says if the property is adjacent to a jurisdiction, whichever jurisdiction's road standard is better, more or less, or is the one that these developers have to go with. And so they disconnected, but they weren't able to accomplish what they wanted to. It wasn't their way of it didn't work getting out of Hurricane City standards. Going back to that example of the Trails Committee, the first time that we had our meeting, we had a representative from the BLM came to the meeting, and she sat in the corner, literally with her arms folded, looking down with kind of a scowl on her face the whole time. And I had to try to figure out a way to get her engaged and make her feel like she was a part of it. And while our elected officials and higher ups are fighting and suing each other, how do I work with the low-level people? And but I continued. One of the things that we needed to open up dialogue. I needed to understand, the rest of the committee needed to understand that, look, there are trails and places that are being used on the BLM that the BLM is not real excited to have you go and promote or show on a plan that is a trail. And so by turning to them when we're talking about different areas and asking the BLM, okay, what do you think about this idea, and getting their feedback, it made them feel like more a part of it. And over the course of about a year and a half with this Trails Committee, we had it where there's a development right now that's right on the edge of St. George City, Davario. The developer came in with this plan. It's adjacent to BLM and some Sitla land, and on that land is some of the best recreation land we have. There's great trails and rock climbing, and the developer was, the original name for the development was like 3 Lakes or something, and he was just going to bulldoze everything and plop in some water features. But the BLM started initiating a conversation, and so we've had meetings now where it's been the BLM, Sitla, Washington County, tourism, representatives from mountain biking community, and St. George City all working together on how do we allow this development to go in and still make sure that we have the trails going through the subdivision. And the developer has been great to work with on it. It's going to be a success. We won't get everything we want, but it's definitely a lot better than what would have happened if we didn't have those relationships.
For those of you that will shake your head and say water and lakes in St. George, I just want to clarify.
Yes.
And we call it, according to the mayor of Santa Clara, you have to say Davario. You have to lower your voice.
Yeah.
It was originally called the plantations, then they changed to the lakes. The lakes were actually reused water that we were pumping up to the Shibwoods Reservation. So it was water effluent that came from our sewage treatment plant.
Garbage water.
And we were going to store it there and pound it there so we could pressurize that. And we, contrary to what they say in the news up here, we use less water than you do on the Wasatch Front for our population. What we do with that is we water our high schools with that water, our golf courses, our big parks, our cemeteries are all on the secondary system and a reuse system where we actually use the effluent.
Comes out of the drinking fountains at the old county building.
And so when you're at the county building, don't fill up your jug. Come over to City Hall. But bringing up that development, that's a good example. As counties, you might say, why do we care what goes on in the annexation? That annexation that I'm talking about is actually just immediately south of Davario, where they have a major roadway that is going to connect Santa Clara and on the east side, west side of the county, and then down over to I-15. And if we let that gap come in and wait for it to develop, we could have all this development in Santa Clara and St. George that has no way to get down to the freeway. And that's why we're saying it's critical that we do that now. Now, why is that important to the county? Because there are areas in the county where if we don't, as cities, or the counties don't work with us to get this done, then they're going to be on your chip seal roads and your narrow roads to get around, and that affects everyone. And that's why the regional transportation planning is so important, even in the more rural counties. Because as you get more tourists and more development, you want to have a plan so that people don't come in and say, what? You're going to build a 5-lane road right here? We had no idea. But somebody had an idea, they just didn't communicate it effectively. Or the needs come up and people didn't realize it, and now they're saying, well, this county road can't handle this anymore. We've got to get the traffic between these two cities somehow, and they're crossing unincorporated county. So that's also where zoning is important too, in coordinating that, so that I can give you another example. In St. George, we allowed a school to be built on 2000 North off Snow Canyon Parkway, and we had homes all along there, but it was an elementary school. It was supposed to be a walking school, not a bus school. But unbeknownst to us, Santa Clara had decided to go through the lava fields and connect their Pioneer Parkway to 2000 North. We already had a stoplight at an intersection right adjacent to that on our major arterial. And now, when they connected that, now we have all this traffic at this intersection past this elementary school that we had no idea was going in, and of course have no way to stop because it came from another jurisdiction. And that's where we could have done a better job, just between cities coordinating that, and that works the same with the counties. You just got to be talking to each other about these things.
You know, I'll keep using the trails example because I'm dealing so much with the trails right now, is, you know, it's trying to get, Washington City is also very active now in developing and building trails. And there was a section of trail, we called it the missing link, and it was getting all of the trails the goal is for someone to be able to ride on a bike from Santa Clara all the way to Zion National Park. That's a big deal, but right now, there was a section between Washington and St. George, that wasn't done. And so the city and the county and tourism and all these groups came together and were able to get the funding and get it accomplished, and that missing link is being developed right now and being built right now. Another thing is, the cities have done a really good job. Washington City's gotten it now. It's all the way to the count. They've gotten it all through this Virgin River Trails now, all the way through Washington City. And as kind of running the Trails Committee, what I've been able to do is I've been able to be a partner with the cities, the Forest Service, BLM, all these groups, in doing letters of support for their trail systems as they're going out and going after grants too. And so there's been a lot more partnership that way, which I think has just helped bring everyone together. But the county needs to step up now and build the trail in the unincorporated area, which will be a challenge because it goes through our landfill and past a shooting range. But we got to figure out a way. Yeah.
That would make me ride my bike faster. That's all I'm saying. It might be an incentive to. But what I think is odd is I would go into the different cities in Washington County and the planning office, and you see a planning and zoning map there, right? And it shows like Santa Clara City or St. George City. It's got all these beautiful colors and shows you where you can do all your cannabis manufacturing, but in your manufacturing and industrial zones. But around it is this sea of white. It's like, those old ancient maps that say like where the ocean just dropped off and there's nothing there. It's like there's nothing that shows the zoning in the adjacent cities or the county or anything. And I think that's a problem. And if you ask them, you ask their planning commission, okay, you're approving this subdivision right on your border. What's on the other side? What does that community have it zoned as if it's vacant ground? They couldn't tell you. A lot of times the staff that's presenting that development can't tell you what's there. And I think that's a problem. I think that's where there should be some, at least with your adjacent jurisdictions, you should be having that communication where you say, listen, as a courtesy, when you make a change to your plan, would you send that to us? Or could we go to the county and have you develop the master, I shouldn't say master plan, but the overall plan that shows what the current plan is, and we could coordinate with you so you could update that so we could all see what's going on in the different jurisdictions, because that helps so much better with planning your water systems, your sewer systems. For us, since we run the regional wastewater, we have to have the regional lines versus the feeder lines that come into it. I guess feeder's not the right word to use for sewer, but in any case, we have to coordinate those things. And if we don't know that they're planning a big short-term rental community, master plan community right there on the border, then we may not have the infrastructure even for stormwater runoff that's going to come our way, because unfortunately St. George is downstream from everywhere in Washington County. So where everything floods, it hits us. And so those are all things that we generally don't think of when we're going into planning commissioners' mission meetings or if we're planning commissioners. But why wouldn't we have that kind of map so you're aware of what's going on next door? That what the adjacent jurisdiction is planning could have a big impact on the intersection that you're requiring, the width of the roadway in your community, just a few blocks in. So I think that's one of the things that I just find interesting, that we don't. We just have this sea of white around our zoning map as if nothing exists outside of our jurisdiction.
And I think, kind of going back to something I touched on at the beginning, how you have these different levels and groups that don't understand what the overall vision and focus is. And it's something that I've tried to do. I have the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission really doesn't need to see, some may say they don't need to see a presentation on tourism or affordable housing. But as I've been involved in these different meetings and we've had different presentations, I've been trying to work and get them into not just the county's Planning Commission, but working with the other jurisdictions. We've had active transportation presentations done, and we're trying to get into some of the cities and doing these active transportation little summit, just a day of doing active transportation, but also doing a presentation with the city council and the planning commission, so they understand the vision that the county and city employees are going for. And so we have ordinances that work. Right now, St. George is working on an ordinance for their downtown. There's this real push, we have this affordable housing issue. We want to get more people downtown. Let's maybe go a little denser than it has been, and it's mostly older single-family homes. But right now, the ordinance, and this was done 20 years ago or so, the ordinance says that if a single-family dwelling is torn down, it can only be replaced with a single-family dwelling. Well, you have this vision of what you want your downtown to look like, but your codes aren't matching it. So how do you work together? And if there may be some people in those downtown neighborhoods that don't want to have a large complex built next to them. But how do you do it right? And how do you work together and come up with good solutions? We have a community in our county that it's Rockville. You drive, they're literally on the road in the Zion Canyon corridor on your way to Springdale and Zion National Park. Rockville wishes that, I don't know if you've seen the Simpsons movie when they drop the big dome over Springfield and no one can get in or around it. That's kind of what Rockville wants.
Only a planner would remember that from the Simpsons movie.
Much ado about nothing. It's another good episode for land use planning. But they see the world changing all around them, and they have a really neat little feel in their town. And if you've driven through, everyone's driven through, no one's allowed to stop. I tried working with them on it. They have so many neat things, and Grafton's close. So I naively went to them and said, hey, I'll help you put together a historic walking tour for down here. We don't want people stopping in our town. We want them going right through. And so they don't want to change, but they have an opportunity, and everything's changing around them. And all they're being is reactionary. They're not looking at, hey, things are going to change. Things may be different what Rockville looks like 20 years from now may be different from now, but how do we direct it in a way that we want it to be instead of just trying to stop it? And I think that's something that a lot of the small communities in Utah need to think about and try to be proactive in coming up with ordinances that work for what your vision is. How much more time do we have?
You've actually got till 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then along those lines that John was talking about this morning is that rural feel. How do you keep that rural feel when you know that you're growing? And a lot of times the county will just say, we'll leave it up to the city. I think the county residents care as much about their county seat. So if you're living in Kane County, you still take some pride in Kanab. That's your county seat. You want it to reflect your community. And so it goes back to what Scott was just saying is it's going to come. The growth is going to come, right? So why not get together and decide how that's going to occur? Because, I go out to Farmington Station. Yeah, it feels like suburbia. But when you go into Farmington, you still feel like you're in a small town, right? And it still is retained that feel. You can do that. We're trying to do that in downtown St. George. It's becoming busier and busier, but people are actually moving back in to downtown St. George, buying those old homes and fixing it up. And guess what? We had done what John was talking about, what so many cities do. When I was in Springville, what they had done, and that is we had just plopped the old R110 zoning down over your old downtown, where that meant creating a lot of non-conforming lots and structures, because the houses weren't 25 feet from the street. They didn't have 10-foot yard setbacks. And so we started working in Springville. We kind of downzoned what we did. A lot of times they just pushed, Salt Lake City had done this years ago, just pushed all the density into those old areas because people could buy homes cheaply and because they're older and tear them down and do that. But what we've done is said, let's make it so that people, those older homes actually conform, and that you could build a new home that has those smaller setbacks and fit those on those lots. Because what we're finding is that the new families that are moving in to downtown, they want to be able to walk to their school. They want to be able to walk to their park. They don't want to drive everywhere they go. They want a grocery store close by, and they don't want a huge yard. So times are changing, and I think where counties used to say, cities, you do it alone, and we're not going to be involved, I think you need to be involved, because the character of Kanab is going to be the character of Payne County. That's just the way it is. So if there's a way for you to collaborate, even if you got to know the planning commissions from the county, if you met once a year or something with your elected officials to talk about some of the issues that you see, that's more communication than what's going on right now. And that's something that I think needs to be done. Here's another thing. As we are rewriting our zoning ordinances to try to catch up to all the latest changes, and I mentioned that's taken us a year and a half, there are smaller jurisdictions around us where their ordinances are woefully out of order. I mean, they are years behind updating them. And yet I have an attorney's office now that has 6 attorneys. When I started there was only 3 of us. But we're doing this, and we have the resources to at least share with them, obviously, the new zoning ordinances that we have, and help talk to them and work with them. I wonder why the counties and the cities don't do more of that. My experience when I worked with UAC is that county attorneys, by and large, off the Wasatch Front, are prosecutors. They're dealing with criminal cases. And so civil is an afterthought sometimes. And so they could use some help in the civil arena sometimes. And quite frankly, we could use the help from the county and other things that we do. And but when it comes to planning and zoning, I would say that if you're in a county where you've got a city that has a city attorney that seems to be, taking care of those things, talk to them and say, hey, would you share these ideas? Could you come and talk to our staff? Could you come and present to our planning commission about some of these changes? Take advantage of those resources, because that's the way government works best, is we're all working for the same taxpayers. Reach out and have that communication.
One of the, as I've been trying, I'm always trying to think outside the box. Maybe I went government, but maybe I shouldn't have gone government. I look at, for instance, St. George, and I look at things that they're trying to promote and how their promotion of whatever it is works for the goal I'm trying to get. An example is active transportation and trails. Here I have a county, we have so much outdoor recreation tourism, and we're wanting that to be even more. And May was Bike Month. We have a Healthy Dixie alliance working with the health department. And so, I took my staff, it didn't take place in unincorporated Washington County, but we manned a station for the Bike to Work Day in St. George City that was sponsored by the health department. Some may say, well, that was kind of out of your realm. You're planning and zoning, Scott. Why are you involved in that? But it's active transportation, so why wouldn't I be a part of that? And the same thing is happening with affordable housing. Right now, St. George just hired someone that's new to be involved with looking at housing and economic development. And she's trying to figure out a way to get things to work in downtown. And so we're trying to find landowners that are willing to get creative and kind of work with us and almost come up with do the process backwards. We're trying to look at it and say, okay, what is needed to make this project affordable? How do we do something that could be a model that the rest of the communities in Washington County use as what affordable housing looks like? It doesn't necessarily mean a trailer park or I had a planning commissioner that when we were working on our affordable housing element of our general plan, and I had someone from 5 County Association of Government come in to do a presentation. Very first comment he said is, the projects, how well did that work for Detroit? And it's, are we talking about the projects? And so education is needed. But we're trying to find a good project here to get going. And then look, we're working with the St. George City planners and trying to figure out, okay, if we can make this little project work, how do we reverse engineer the ordinances for St. George City so that this project could work? And is that what we want to do? And so that's in the infancy stage right now, but that's something that we're partnering together on. Anyone have any questions? Examples that they want to share? Anyone awake?
All right, well, if there aren't any questions, thank you guys. Really appreciate it.